everyone, and welcome to another special episode of the High Tech Women Podcast, brought to you by Symphony Technology Solutions and Gilbane Building Company. I am your host today, Katie Galley, and I am joined in the Symphony studio by two incredible panelists. One might look familiar to you. Today, these two panelists will be going into a discussion about some digital tools, and specifically, we'll talk about what we're going to be discussing in a minute here. But you guys can welcome back VDC engineer with Gilbane, Grace Kennedy. How are you doing, Grace?
Hey, Katie, I'm good. Great to be here.
So happy to have you back. I like the Gilbane polo. That's nice. Like
thanks. Thanks. I thought I'd rep the company, you know?
There you go. Rep the brand. Love it. Love it. And today, Grace, we have a really great co-panelist. And with us, we have architectural associate at Flad Architects, Nicole Boris. How are you doing, Nicole?
Good. How are you today?
Awesome. I like your green shirt too. It doesn't say Gilbane, but you know, so cool. So thank you both ladies for joining us today. So to kick us off, kind of wanted to get, you know, as we've done in the past, a little bit of background, just kind of share a little bit about your company and kind of how you ended up where you are today. So Grace, you want to kick us off?
Yep, this will be a one you've heard before, Katie, so I'll make it short and sweet. I am currently a VDC engineer at Gilbane Building Company in Orlando, Florida. And VDC stands for Virtual Design and Construction. So I digitally coordinate the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection systems within a project to minimize on-site issues. And I actually have a background in architecture. So I got my master's at the University of Kansas. And my fifth year, I did a design build studio, Studio 804, where 14 graduate architecture students and myself designed and built 2 houses. And from there, realized I had a passion for minimizing those on-site issues. So this is how I ended up here as a VDC engineer.
You got that down pat now, Grace, just like you know exactly what
Thanks,
to say.
Thanks. Try to shorten it up, short and sweet.
There you go, 30 seconds, just in and out, like it. All right, so Nicole, what about you?
So I've been with Vlad for 3 years. We work on mostly healthcare projects. Before that, I'm originally from New Jersey, so I moved down here about 3 years ago.
Me too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Before that, I had worked in New York City. I'd done transportation infrastructure, and then I did a year doing K through 12 schools. And that's how, I had like 7 years experience at a school. So yeah.
Nice.
I love it. Yeah. So where do you live now? I'm sorry. Where is Flad located?
Oh, sorry. So we're, our main office is in Tampa, but I'm working from home currently.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I live over in St. Pete area.
Cool. Yeah. I was just wondering, I figured where Grace, you guys are kind of close, I guess.
Yep. The St. Pete area is beautiful. My grandpa lives over there.
Ooh. Yeah, it makes sense coming down from Jersey, moving down south. Do you ever want to go back up north? No.
Sometimes when it was snowing this season, I was really missing it. So
yeah, it's nice to look at, but not like be in, I think.
Yeah, when your tires are stuck in the ice, it's not fun.
Yeah, Katie and I share that.
Yeah, Grace knows.
I like the warmth.
Yes.
Yeah.
Warm weather all day. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today. So like we discussed, we're going to be diving into a discussion on digital tools and specifically something that you both work in Revit. So we're going to kind of dive into that discussion. So to kick us off, Grace, maybe you give us kind of an overview of what Revit is?
Oh, okay. Yeah, definitely. Revit is an Autodesk software. It's particularly used for modeling, like model creation. It can also be used for document or deliverable creation. But basically, as an architecture major, I used to use this daily, and you can produce a 3D model with Revit. And then what's nice is it houses this model, and then you can pull 2D drawings from that 3D model. So you can pull plans, sections, elevations, etc. Of course, there's a bunch of other aspects to Revit, but I guess that's kind of an overview. I guess, Nicole, am I missing anything?
No, that's about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All the systems that go with it. So
Sweet. Well, so now both of you, like you said, Grace, something you worked in Revit as an architecture student. So for both of you, how often do you use Revit and what do you use it for? Nicole, do you want to kick us off with that question?
sure. So I use Revit pretty much every day. Right now we're in construction phase on a project I'm working on. So I still use it when issues come up in the field. Sometimes it's helpful to just look at something in 3D, or we have to do sketches and make changes, and it helps really to keep track of all those changes when we've had 2,000 something RFIs, which is requests for information. So we just, it really helps keep track of that. We've used it a lot with Grace's help. She did a great job doing clash detection. So that was where we have all these utilities structure within the building, and it helps to find areas that in the 3D model, maybe there'd be an issue or a pipe is going through a mechanical duct, and obviously we can't have that. So it helps try to resolve that before it comes in the field and they're ready to install it and they're like, well, this isn't going to work. So it really helps eliminate that. And then I'd say really where it's helpful is during when you have your schematic design, which is when you're starting a project and design, moving into design documents and construction documents is where it's really saved so much time for architects and engineers. Like Grace said, you can add elevation sections. All you have to do is draw the wall once, and it helps generate all this information for you.
Wow. Yeah, because it, like, Katie, for reference, old school days, you had to hand draft all of these different views, elevation section plans, and when something had to be adjusted, let's say a wall moved 4 inches, you had to go back and adjust every single one of those drawings. But now having a 3D model available to you in that Revit allows you to produce, you can just adjust the 3D model like Nicole was saying, and then it automatically adjusts the drawings that are tied to that.
Wow. So how long has that been, I guess, in place? Were either of you having to hand draw anything at the start of your careers?
Oh man, you're testing our architecture history here. So I think, Nicole, correct me if I'm wrong. So at University of Kansas, our first year we hand drafted everything because the professors wanted us to know, initially how everything was done, and they wanted us to have that traditional hand drafting experience, so that we wouldn't take for granted the digital tools that we have today.
Right.
I don't know when Revit started. That would be a Google. Nicole, do you know?
I don't know the exact year. I'd say probably around 2010 or so, when it started to be implemented. I know a lot of some firms have been slow to integrate that, mostly because, if somebody's been using AutoCAD for, 10, 15 years, their whole firm and standard are set on that. So it does take a little while for them to transition to Revit, and a little bit of effort to create your own standards in that, and to do training. So if you didn't learn it in school and, you have to learn this new software, then it takes time to learn it. But really, in the end, it saves so much time. And I had the same experience, Grace, where we did hand drafting the first year because you really need that connection, with the pen and paper, and to really learn the drafting essentials before you move into the computer. But we did start to learn Revit probably my 4th year. We started to learn it.
Nice. Yeah. And just Googled right now. So according to Google, it says that Revit version 1.0, was released on April 5th, 2000, year 2000. Okay. So, and Katie, for reference, we're on Revit version, 20. I'm currently normally use 2020. Has 2021 come out yet, Nicole? Do we know?
Oh, I don't think we have it available yet. Right now I'm using 2018, but
Oh, okay, okay. It honestly, it depends. Some of my projects, the architects are using 2020, some are using 2018, 2019. It totally just depends. But yeah. So 2000 is
Wow.
when Revit was born. Wow.
That's pretty
Okay.
cool. So
Yeah.
then is Revit, I'm not sure if you would know this, is Revit the industry leader? So then if you, because both of you work in Revit, so then if you came up against someone who didn't use Revit or another firm, how do you navigate that? Or does pretty much across the board everybody work in Revit at this point?
I would say the majority of, especially larger firms, are using Revit.
Okay.
I did actually have my former two firms that I worked at were not using it yet at the time. So I was
Oh,
using AutoCAD.
really? Okay.
Yeah, especially when I did the K through 12 schools, it was a lot of renovation work, and some of the architects there were older, so they were still using CAD.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was happy
Um,
to get back to using it when I came to Vlad. So
Definitely,
yeah.
definitely. So Katie, from my experience and what I know, Revit is kind of like the monster superpower. It is the leader.
Yeah.
For most firms, I would say they're mainly using Revit as the 3D modeling software. But Autodesk again owns Revit, and Autodesk has a bunch of other softwares as well. Navisworks is one of them. That kind of take over the industry, I would say.
Gotcha. Okay. So that makes sense. I would assume there was kind of a leader, and it makes sense that Revit is that leader since you both work in it. So within Revit, do you use specific plugins, or how does it kind of, getting into the weeds of the specific software, what plugins do you use, and what are their functionalities?
Right. So, good question. So what I use Revit for is not typically model creation as a VDC engineer. I will model if necessary. However, I normally receive models from architects, engineers, mechanical, trade contractors, fire protection, etc. I take those models together, put them in the shell, architecture and structural shell, run those clashes. And so I'm typically working in Navisworks. That's where I mainly exist. But in Revit, I used to use plugins like Enscape, which produces renders for Revit for your perspective views. But now as a VDC engineer, I use Dynamo, not as frequently. Taylor Oswald, she is like a whiz at Dynamo, and she's a VDC engineer up in Atlanta with Gilbane Building Company. But I'll use Dynamo, which basically it expedites processes. So repetitive processes, Dynamo, you can create a visual script and it will speed those up and do it for you. It's like a visual coding, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Nicole, what about you?
So we do have some people at Flad that are experimenting with Dynamo. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can use scripting, and from my understanding, it's similar to Grasshopper, which is what I played around with in school, which is trying to make more of a graphic interface for coding. And it's totally above my head. In terms of coding, I tried to get into biomimicry and using algorithms and stuff. So
it's tricky. It's
very cool, but on a daily basis, I don't use that. I do know a lot of people like to use Enscape for renderings. It's good to get a quick rendering shot of your 3D view. Say your client wants to see how something looks. So with like a little bit of effort, you already have the 3D model work done. My understanding is it's pretty quick to get a decent rendering. Maybe it's not something you want to put in a magazine, but it gets the point across. In school, I had used more like 3ds Max and stuff like that, and it takes a lot more time to get the lighting right and materials. So, I do know that it's good to have something quick. And I do use something called Unify, which is something to keep a library sort of all your families. So at Flad, we do a lot of like healthcare and labs. So you have a lot of equipment that you have to try to plan for. And this helps keep a library. And so if you make, even if it's just a box or more, maybe a more detailed family, it allows us to keep track of that per project. And then, you know, say we're with a similar client, we can go back to that library and just import those families if they're using the same kind of equipment.
Oh, nice.
Track of it like that.
It's called Unify?
Yes.
Okay, good to
That's
know.
what we use. And also we have like a spreadsheet link. I guess it's sort of a plugin, so you can link Excel to Revit. You can make schedules within Revit, but this, for me, I think it's like a quicker way to export. Say I want to get a quantity on something in the model, like how many of this kind of cabinet do we have? It's a really quick way to export that, sort it by room number or whatever you need. So that's been pretty useful. It's not the most glamorous, fun plugin, but
no, I mean, it's necessary though. Oh yeah. And also, Katie, for reference, so families is a term within Revit that's like the different components that you will need, like typically their furniture, like what Nicole said, some sort of equipment for labs or specialty hospital rooms. Okay. Families is a term that you use for those components that you're importing into your model.
Got it.
And
thank you for explaining, because obviously I know exactly what you're talking about and what you're using, but it's for, you know, for someone listening who might not know. So thanks.
Sorry, you know, if I'm using this every day, I forget. Like I'm so in.
No, it's good.
I forget.
Oh, that's good. Good catch, Grace. But yeah, no, I mean it's super interesting, and I love you know, it's interesting talking about the platform itself, rather, but then it seems like these different plugins then allow for different capabilities within it. So then with kind of the utilization of one, Revit itself, but then all these additional plugins that you use depending upon the project, whether it's healthcare or within anything else, would you guys say that you enjoy using the interface? Is it pretty user-friendly, or is it depend upon like maybe the plugin that you're using within Revit? Grace?
Oh gosh. So okay, I did not like Revit initially because, and again, this is when I was in architecture school a long time ago, and when I was first using Revit and getting to know Revit, I did not like it, and it was very finicky, and it's because it provided so many capabilities and it has so many settings and like the opportunities of what you can create within Revit and what you can do is so vast. And because of that, you really have to, every single setting has to be checked properly in order for you to like use it the way you want to use it. Like for example, in a certain view, you might not be seeing some sort of wall or component that you want to show, and it's, you know, it's vital for this view. You have to play around with a bunch of settings in Revit, which again is fantastic that it allows you, you know, it has all of these different capabilities, but because of that, it can be kind of finicky, because when you're trying to do one thing, there might be 10 different ways to accomplish that one thing. Or, you know, if you're trying to show that certain thing, and it's not working, you have to go through the 10-step process and be like, crap, check that off. Okay, that didn't work, so it's got 9 others. So again, it's very impressive, the capabilities that Revit has. Because of that, it's just very difficult to learn. But once you do, it's, you know, you're into the flow of it. It's a whole new language, and it's fantastic. So
gotcha.
Yeah, I'd say I had a similar experience in school. Like it's definitely not a beginner 3D modeling program. Like we started in SketchUp and also Rhino. And Rhino is sort of like a mix between SketchUp and AutoCAD. It has the commands, but it's really good for, you know, custom 3D models. And then we got into Revit. So yeah, I hit the same roadblocks you did, Grace.
Yep.
in my 4th year. But I think after knowing it, and then after working so many years doing construction documents, because when we're in school, we're not as involved with construction documents yet. You're more in design and doing your presentation work. So now that I've done so many years of that, I see that Revit was really developed for that in mind, for that.
Oh, definitely.
Sense. And so now both of you having, like you said, Nicole, really diving into the actual experience, right, outside of school and being able to be in the field and work in Revit and learning all the things that you have. Do you find that there's anything lacking that you wish Revit had the capability to do now that you've been, you've gained this experience, or are there areas in Revit that are you work in other platforms to make up for? How does that kind of work, Grace?
On my end, I would say, oh man, I'm gonna pass this one to Nicole. I gotta think through this question real quick. Was it?
So one thing I could think of is, like I mentioned before, like your schematic design, like SketchUp. I know for us, we use SketchUp. It's quicker to get a massing model and get your idea across using something like that. It's just more time efficient for early modeling stages. Even though Revit does have massing models, it's just easier to do it in SketchUp. One thing I'd say during construction documents, when you're working on a large project, they have this feature called syncing. So your model is on a cloud. So like, say you could have 10 people working at the same time. When you click sync, your changes will show up. And when someone else clicks sync, you'll see it right away. So it does help. And we have models that are linked. So we have like an architecture model, we have the structure model and mechanical model, and all these are linked together. So it helps in that way. But then we had a lot of times where people are syncing at the same time and it crashes or it's slow, and
Yep.
So there's that aspect that
definitely
could be
that's such a good point about conceptual modeling and how Revit is not necessarily tailored to that, because the point of Revit is to create construction documents. And Katie, construction documents are like your final, like these construction documents will be translated into the field. Like this is what the field conditions are. So it's your most like finalized version of the project, right? So when you're just, getting an initial site and throwing out ideas for what you want to, what you want this building to look like, what you want the function to be like, what you want the circulation to look like, you don't need all of that detail. You don't need like the cladding on all of the walls. You don't need all of these things, but Revit is meant for that. And it's a lot difficult to create a couple boxes and some spheres in Revit. It's much easier to do that on SketchUp, like what you said, Nicole. Or I used Rhino a lot. I actually really like Rhino. It makes a lot of sense to me. So for some reason, I just got along better with Rhino than I did Revit in the beginning.
Yeah, I like Rhino a lot, and I'd say too. One time I worked on this historical project, and we had to model all the moldings and the coffered ceiling and stuff. Revit is not good with that either. That is definitely something I would use Rhino for.
But again, like it started April 5th, 2000 at version 1.0, and we're at, version 20 or 21 coming up. And I'm sure, Autodesk keeps improving constantly. So I'm sure that's something that are aware of and working on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, all the transitions. Go ahead, Nicole.
Oh, I was going to say, I think, if you have a complaint, you can like put it on their website, and they kind of use that because when you read the updates of what's new and they're like, oh, we tried to address this concern, or if you have a crash report, you can send that in too.
Mm-hmm.
So Nicole, why, no, I mean, you obviously were focusing on Revit, but you guys both seem to like the application Rhino. So why, with that specific project that you were working in, why was Rhino a better fit for that over Revit?
Oh, for the historical project?
Yeah.
It may have been too that I didn't know exactly how to do it in Revit at the time, but just if you think of a historic building and has a lot of different trim pieces,
okay,
a lot of different details that at the time was hard to figure out. It wasn't very easy to figure out in Revit.
Gotcha.
It would be a lot more time consuming to get, I don't know how to explain it. So say, for instance, you have like the special molding on the wall, you'd have to create sort of a reveal profile and get that into your, there's like 3 different steps, where in Rhino, I could just do an extrusion and, copy and paste it and stuff like that. So
yeah, Rhino is really good for those detail 3D model work. So if you want to create some sort of custom molding or 3D model design, Katie, I'm trying to think of like some sort of an example. Like on exterior columns, I believe, like the scrolls that are on top and they're extra detailed, and yep. So in Rhino, it would be much easier to produce something like that, and like even a custom unique one, versus in Rev. So I guess here's a good comparison. In Rhino, you can create your own 3D model of that. We're getting into the nitty gritty there, but in Revit, what you would have to do is probably look up some sort of family or component to drop in that has this pre-made scroll type of a detail on your column. Would that, am I making sense there, Nicole and or Katie?
Yeah.
And you can, I think Revit does have like import features. So you could do something like that in Rhino, which is, I think, what I ended up doing, and then importing those. But, you do lose some of the functionality in Revit when you do that at the time. Maybe they've gotten it better, but.
Yeah, because Rhino, you can get into the real nitty gritty where it's like, I don't like the angle of this curve. I can adjust all of the 3D points. In Rhino, you can do that, but in Revit, you can't once this component is there. Or you can if you start from scratch, but if you're just dropping in some sort of a family, you can't, or you have to go through a bunch of other steps.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that was my follow-up question was, can you then do something in Rhino and just kind of copy it over to Revit? But maybe one of those plugins can make it, Nicole, maybe that's what made it possible.
There may be something out there, and I just haven't had to do that in a while. So
yeah,
I got to do some more research.
Well, I certainly learned a ton from you ladies today. Do you have any closing thoughts before we wrap, Nicole or Grace?
No, I guess, Nicole, thank you so much for joining us on this podcast discussion. Really appreciate your time, and I enjoyed analyzing and dissecting the digital tool Revit.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a great opportunity.
So Nicole, if someone wanted to learn more about you or Flad Architects, where might they do that?
You can go on our website at, I believe it's just flad.com. Should check the link.
I think it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And Grace, what about you? Where can we find out about you and Gilbane?
You can just, do a little Google of Gilbane Building Company, or you can, if you want to message me separately, you can follow me on LinkedIn, message me on LinkedIn, Grace Kennedy, VDC engineer at Gilbane Building Company. And my email is gkennedy1@gilbaneco.com.
Number 1, the only one, right, Grace?
Wow. Sure. Yeah, we'll go
Love
with
it. Well, Nicole, there you go, add the hair. Nicole and Grace, thank you both so much for this deep dive into Revit, and we'll see you all next time on our next episode of this High Tech Women podcast.